Minister Heather Humphreys, you have 15 minutes.
I got. First of all, I'm pleased to respond to the Deputy's bill, and just for the record, I am the Minister for Arts, Heritage and the Gaeltacht until an order is made to change the name, and Heritage has been part of my department's remit for the last 5 years. So just to say that the Minister for Arts has responsibility for hare coursing, there are other responsibilities within that department, and they have been there for some time now. Firstly, I'd like to set out for the House the legislative framework under which hare coursing operates. The control of live hare coursing, including the operation of individual coursing meetings and managing the use of hares for that activity, is carried out under the Greyhound Industry Act 1958, which is the responsibility of my colleague, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and Marine. Hare coursing is administered by the Irish Coursing Club, which is a body set up under the Greyhound Industry Act of 1958. Hares are protected species under the Wildlife Acts and may only be hunted by certain methods and during certain time periods as regulated under the Open Seasons Order. The hunting methods allowed are shooting with firearms, coursing at regulated coursing matches and hunting with packs of beagles and harriers. Under this legislation, hare coursing meetings are allowed between the 26th of September and the end of February of the following year. Licences are issued by my department on an annual basis under the Wildlife Acts to the Irish Coursing Club on behalf of their affiliated clubs to facilitate the tagging and capturing of hares for the purpose of hare coursing during a given coursing season. The licences granted to the Irish Coursing Club include strict conditions which have been developed and refined over the years. My primary responsibility under the Wildlife Acts relate to the conservation of hares, and that is why it falls under the heritage section of my department. In regard to conservation, there is no current evidence that coursing has a significant effect on hare populations, and the decision to issue licences has taken into consideration the final report of the status of hares in Ireland, Hare Survey of Ireland 2006 to 2007, which estimated that the population of hares in Ireland was in the region of 535,000 in 2007. In recent years, in considering licence applications from the Irish Coursing Club, my department has taken account of the most recent conservation assessment in 2013, which was submitted to the European Commission on Habitats and Species. This report indicated that the Irish hare was considered widespread and common in Ireland, and also stated that none of the threats, such as changing agricultural practices, are considered likely to impact on its conservation status in the foreseeable future. Officials of the National Parks and Wildlife Service of my department monitor coursing meetings as resources allow to ensure that the various conditions of the licences are adhered to. Veterinary officials from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine also attend some coursing meetings. In addition, the Irish Coursing Club ensure there is a vet and control steward present at all coursing meetings. I should also point out that since I took over responsibility for this area, I have been active in ensuring that the conditions of the licences are enforced. For example, following the 2013-2014 season, I threatened sanctions against two coursing clubs, Mallow and Liscannor, relating to non-cooperation with officials of my department. Since then, there have been improvements in both clubs, and this reflects the success in the monitoring regime in operation by my department. In addition, I took further sanctions against two further clubs, Thurles and Doon, on foot of lack of cooperation with my department officials during the 2014-2015 season. Subsequently, following a court conviction involving some Doon members, I was considering further sanctions against Doon when the Irish Coursing Club cancelled the Doon meeting scheduled for last November. And I welcome this decision by the ICC, as it's an indication of the seriousness with which they view the issue. And what those sanctions also highlight is just how tightly controlled and regulated hare coursing is in Ireland. And I would remind the deputies who are calling for an outright ban on the potential dangers of such action, it could drive coursing underground. And the very real danger is that would result in unregulated coursing meetings, which would represent far greater dangers for the safety of hares. And I know concerns have been raised that this has been the consequence of the ban in Northern Ireland. The Irish Coursing Club have applied for licences to capture and tag hares for the forthcoming 2016-2017 coursing season, and these are under consideration. I am aware that officials of my department have raised a number of issues with the Irish Coursing Club following monitoring reports on meetings held during the 2015-2016 season. These matters will be further discussed at a meeting between officials of my department and the Irish Coursing Club in the next few weeks, and I do not rule out further sanctions against individual coursing clubs if it is warranted. The Deputy's bill is primarily aimed at the welfare of the hare, and I want to assure the House that while my department's primary responsibility relates to the conservation status of the Irish hare, many of the conditions which are attached to the licences issued by my department to the ICC relate to the welfare of the hare. These strict conditions cover a range of areas covering hare welfare and include providing data on hare captures and releases, having a veterinary surgeon in attendance at a coursing meeting, not coursing hares more than once per day, not coursing sick or injured hares, and having adequate escapes for hares during coursing, and releasing hares in daylight the day after the coursing meeting with the agreement of my officials. The Irish Coursing Club also has extensive systems and practices in place to underpin the welfare of hares and greyhounds involved in coursing, and goes to great lengths to ensure the highest standards of welfare are adhered to. A monitoring committee on coursing is in place, comprised of officials from my department, the ICC and the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, to monitor developments in coursing, and in that regard the situation is kept under constant review to ensure that coursing is run in a well-controlled and responsible manner in the interests of both hares and greyhounds. In relation to the muzzling of greyhounds, while this is a matter for my colleague, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, it is my understanding that the Irish Coursing Club has had mandatory muzzling of greyhounds at regulated coursing meetings since the early 1990s, and the muzzling of greyhounds obviously assists in reducing the number of hare injuries. Since my reappointment to Cabinet, the remit of my department has been expanded to include both rural affairs and regional development. Members of the House will be aware that hare coursing is mainly a rural activity. There are between 70 and 80 meetings held around the country, and in some cases they attract thousands of people to rural towns. In many parts of the country, especially in Munster, it is an integral part of the sporting year. For example, the National Hare Coursing Meeting in Clonmel attracts approximately 10,000 visitors, and it is estimated to be worth about €6 million to the local economy. Any proposal to ban live coursing would have a serious economic impact on these towns. While our discussion is largely based around regulated coursing in terms of conservation of the hare, there is a much greater issue to be considered, and that is the practice of hare lurching, which appears to be on the increase in certain parts of the country. This illegal practice of hunting hares usually involves people entering farmland and bogs without permission with one or more lurcher-type dogs. The number of people involved in the group may vary, but usually groups of 2 to 8 individuals are involved. The dogs are kept on leads and only released when a hare is flushed, whereupon the dogs chase and catch the hare, generally resulting in the death of the hare. This activity mostly occurs during daylight hours, but may also take place at night. In many cases, it appears there are organised gangs involved in this illegal activity. Many of them have no hesitation in using social media to display pictures of dead hares. There have been a number of prosecutions in recent years taken by my department, and recently both my department and An Garda Síochána have engaged in joint operations to apprehend individuals engaged in hare lurching and bring them to court. I understand that in some instances it can be difficult to take prosecutions, as some landowners may be reluctant to give evidence of illegal hunting on their lands due to intimidation or fear of reprisals. While I do not have figures on the numbers of hares killed by illegal hare lurching, indications are that it could run into hundreds. And again, I would reiterate that it is this type of illegal activity which is far more harmful to hares than regulated coursing meetings. And I do appreciate There are many individuals who are opposed to hare coursing, but equally for many rural communities, the activity is an integral part of their heritage, and it's my job to find a balance. I have mentioned the muzzling of greyhounds, as well as the conditions which my department attaches to licences, all of which have shown very positive outcomes for hares. My department's responsibilities under the Wildlife Acts relate to the conservation of the Irish hare, and as I have already stated, this is not under threat. The fact remains that due to the strict regulations which are in place, over 99% of hares used in coursing are released back into the wild. And I want to assure the House that my department will continue to work with the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine and the ICC to ensure that the welfare of the hare is paramount during coursing meetings. I therefore recommend to the House that this bill be rejected. Gura Maith Agat.